I had always believed that family dinners were a time to gather, laugh, and share stories. But that night, everything changed. As we sat around the table, enjoying the meal I had spent hours preparing, my daughter-in-law, Lily, casually dropped a bombshell. "You're too controlling, Martha. You don't let anyone breathe around here." Her words hung in the air like an unwanted guest, and my fork froze midair. I glanced around the table, hoping someone would speak up, but everyone remained silent. My heart raced, but I kept my composure. It wasn't the first time Lily had made a jab at me, but this time felt different. The coldness in her voice, the smug look on her face. It was as if she had been waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I knew I had to say something, but I wasn't sure how. My son, David, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding eye contact. I could feel his hesitation, his unwillingness to defend me. After all these years, was this really how they saw me? Was I just the overbearing mother-in-law who didn't know when to back off? The silence in the room was deafening. Lily's words replayed in my mind, but I refused to let them show how much they stung. I wasn't going to let her have the satisfaction of seeing me upset. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me, the years of suppressed anger, the moments when I had been pushed aside for the sake of convenience. It was as if everything I had done for this family, every meal, every gesture of love, every sacrifice, meant nothing. But I wasn't going to let her win. Not tonight. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor as I grabbed the microphone from the stand. The room fell even quieter, everyone unsure of what was coming next. I took a deep breath, my hands steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "Lily," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I've spent my whole life making sure this family is taken care of, but it seems like that's never enough for you." I paused, watching her expression change from smugness to confusion. "You think I'm controlling? Maybe you should take a good look at your own actions before you throw stones." My words were sharp, but I didn't feel regret. In fact, I felt a strange sense of liberation. The years of swallowing my feelings, of holding my tongue to keep the peace, had finally caught up with me. It was time for them to hear the truth I had been holding inside for so long. I wasn't going to be the quiet, invisible mother anymore. Not tonight. Not ever again. I could feel all eyes on me as I stood there, microphone in hand, my words hanging in the air. For a moment, it felt like the room was holding its breath. My heart was still pounding, but I refused to show any fear. The truth was out now, and I wasn't backing down. Lily's face had shifted from smugness to something more defensive, but I wasn't done. I had more to say. "You think I've been controlling all these years?" I continued, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside. "Maybe it's time someone told you the truth. I've spent my life giving, bending over backward to make sure this family had everything it needed. And you, Lily, you've never been satisfied. I've always been here, quietly in the background, making sure things ran smoothly. But you..." I paused, glaring at her. "You've been taking, using, and complaining about everything I do, without ever considering what I've sacrificed." I could see the shift in Lily's expression. She wasn't expecting this. Her arrogance, her need to always be the center of attention, was slowly crumbling. But I wasn't done yet. "David, my own son," I went on, my eyes now locking with his. "You've stood by, silent, letting her tear this family apart. Do you remember how we used to sit together, laughing, sharing stories? That was before you let her come between us. You don't even know what it's like to sit at the table and have a real conversation anymore. You've lost touch with what really matters." I could see the guilt in his eyes, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to erase the years of pain he had caused by choosing her over me. The family I had built, the love I had poured into every meal, every holiday, every word of advice, it all seemed to mean nothing to him now. But I wasn't about to give up. I had a right to speak, a right to be heard. "I'm not a burden. David, I'm your mother," I said, my voice softening, but the power in my words still there. "And I deserve more than this. More than to be pushed aside like an old piece of furniture. I gave you life, raised you with love, and this is how you repay me." The silence in the room was deafening. No one dared to speak. Lily shifted uncomfortably in her seat, unable to meet my gaze. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over the situation. This wasn't about being controlling. This was about standing up for myself, about no longer allowing myself to be silenced. I could see David trying to process what I had just said, But it was too late for apologies now. I had waited too long for a moment like this. The years of feeling invisible, of being the one who always gave, always took care, had finally come to a head. I wasn't just a mother, a wife, a grandmother. I was a person with my own needs, my own voice. And I was done being quiet. I'm not going to sit here and pretend everything's fine anymore, I said, my tone firm. I've been a part of this family for too long to be treated like this, and I won't let it happen again. I dropped the microphone back into its stand, turned, and walked out of the room. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The truth had been spoken, and for the first time in years, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I wasn't going to be the quiet, invisible woman anymore. I had finally found my voice. I left the room without looking back, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the hallway as I made my way to the living room. I felt the weight of the moment settle on me, but it wasn't the crushing weight of defeat that I had grown so accustomed to. It was a weight of liberation, of finally standing up for myself, for demanding the respect I had always deserved. The cold, empty house suddenly felt different. The silence was no longer suffocating. It was mine to command. I sat down on the couch, letting the stillness wash over me. For the first time in years, I could hear my own thoughts clearly without the constant noise of family expectations drowning them out. The family dinner had been a turning point, but it wasn't just about the dinner itself. It was about every moment I had spent over the years, every meal I had cooked, every moment I had put my family first, only to be pushed aside when I needed them most. The more I thought about it, the more the reality sank in. David, my son, the man I had raised with love and care, had allowed Lily to take control. She had manipulated him, used him to get what she wanted. And he had let her. He hadn't defended me when I needed him, not when it mattered. He hadn't even tried to see things from my perspective. All those years, I had watched as my family, my life, was slowly taken from me by someone I had welcomed into my home. But no more. I had spent so much of my life bending over backwards for others, for family, for love. And what did it get me? A lifetime of feeling invisible. A lifetime of being the one who gave and gave, without ever receiving anything in return. But now I was done. I had to remind myself of the woman I once was, the woman who had stood strong, the woman who had never backed down from a challenge. This wasn't just about Lily anymore. It was about me, about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my happiness. I wasn't going to be pushed around any longer. The more I thought about it, the more determined I became. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of something new. I didn't need their approval, their validation. I had spent so many years living for everyone else. Now it was my turn to live for me. I stood up, feeling the strength returning to my legs, the power that had been buried under years of self-doubt and sacrifice. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to let them take my life away from me anymore. It was time to take control, my control. The first step was simple. I would no longer be the silent observer in my own life. I would no longer let anyone else dictate my worth. The journey ahead wasn't going to be easy, but it would be mine. For the first time in a long while, I smiled. I had a long road ahead of me, but I was ready for it. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone stand in my way. I walked back into the living room, feeling the weight of my decision settle in. There was no going back now. For years, I had put everyone else's needs before my own. I had sacrificed my own happiness for the sake of keeping the peace, of maintaining the family harmony. But that was over. It was time for me to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The silence that had followed my words earlier still lingered in the house. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. David, my son, had barely spoken a word since the dinner. Lily, my daughter-in-law, had avoided my gaze, her face a mixture of shock and resentment. I wasn't sure what had changed in them. Maybe it was the sudden realization that I wasn't the same woman I had been before. Maybe it was the truth that finally hit them. I didn't care anymore. I had waited too long to stand up for myself. The house felt different now, not just in its silence, but in the way I felt about it. For years, I had thought of this house as a symbol of everything I had worked for, of my family, of the life I had built. But now, it felt like a prison. The walls that had once held so many memories now felt suffocating, as if they were closing in on me. I needed a change. I had to leave. I wasn't sure where I would go yet, but I knew it had to be somewhere away from all of this. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this house, this life, wasn't mine anymore. It had become a reminder of everything I had lost, everything I had given up. I walked into the kitchen, the one place where I had always found comfort. The dishes were still half finished from dinner, the remnants of the meal I had so carefully prepared for my family. I stared at the plates for a moment, my fingers tracing the edges of the porcelain. The act of cooking for them, of making sure they were all taken care of, had been my way of showing love. But now it felt like I had been doing it for nothing. I wasn't appreciated, not by David, not by Lily, not by anyone. I was just the one who cooked, the one who cleaned, the one who kept everything running smoothly. But they didn't see me. They never really had. I felt my anger flare up again, but this time it was different. It wasn't the helpless anger I had felt before, the kind that made me keep quiet and swallow my pride. This was the kind of anger that gave me strength, the kind that pushed me to make a change. I didn't need them. I didn't need their approval. I had spent too many years being invisible in my own life. It was time to stop. I took one last look at the kitchen, at the life I had built here, and then I turned and walked out. The door shut softly behind me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. I had no idea what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer going to be the quiet, submissive woman I had been. I was going to live for myself now. It was my turn. I spent the next few days in a daze, trying to adjust to this new life I had chosen for myself. It wasn't as easy as I had imagined. The house, once a place of constant activity and family togetherness, now felt eerily quiet. I had never been alone for long periods of time, and now that I was, it was both comforting and unsettling. I tried to keep myself busy, sorting through old belongings, packing up things I no longer needed, and making plans for the future. But there were moments, like when I sat down for a meal alone, that the reality of what had happened hit me hard. I had made the decision to leave, to walk away from everything I knew, but that didn't mean the pain was gone. I still missed my son, despite everything. I still wish things could have been different, that he could have seen me for the person I was, not just as a tool for his convenience. But what hurt the most was Lily. I had welcomed her into my family, treated her like my own daughter, and yet, she had been the one to cut me down first, to take advantage of my kindness, to manipulate my son into pushing me aside. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I had given so much, and she had taken it all without a second thought. But as the days passed, I started to realize something. I had been the one holding on to the past. I had been the one who had allowed myself to be defined by my role in the family, by my duty to them. It wasn't until I walked away that I truly understood the depth of my own strength. I wasn't just a mother, a wife, a grandmother. I was Martha, and Martha deserved more than to be ignored and discarded. I spent that week making calls, looking at new places to live, researching communities where I could start fresh. It wasn't easy. The world felt so much bigger now, so much more overwhelming than I had imagined. But there was something thrilling about it too. For the first time, I felt like I was in control of my life. No more pretending, no more living for others. It was time to live for myself. On the third day, I received a message from David. "Mom, can we talk?" It was short, simple, and it hit me like a punch in the gut. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to leave the past where it belonged. But another part of me, the part that still cared about him, knew that I couldn't just close that door forever. I replied, "I'm available. When do you want to talk?" The wait for his response felt like an eternity. When he finally called, I could hear the hesitation in his voice. "I've been thinking about everything you said," he started. "And Mom, I'm sorry. I never meant for things to get this way. I let Lily." He trailed off, and I could hear the guilt in his tone. I took a deep breath. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. The moment where I could decide whether or not to let him back into my life. I had to be careful. "David," I said, my voice steady but firm. "You can't just apologize and expect everything to be okay. This isn't about a simple misunderstanding. You let her push me out, and you didn't stand up for me. You let her control the narrative, and you didn't even see it. I don't know if I can forgive that." He was silent for a long time, and I could feel the weight of his regret, but I didn't know if that was enough. Maybe it was time to let go for good, to stop hoping things would change, and start accepting that they had already changed. "I don't expect forgiveness," he finally said, his voice small, "but I want you to know I've been wrong. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this." I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. "It's not just about fixing it, David. It's about me. about finding my own way now. I hung up the phone, feeling a sense of finality. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let anyone else dictate my happiness again. I spent the next few days alone in my thoughts, reflecting on the conversation with David. It had been a long time since I had heard him speak like that, so sincere, so remorseful. Part of me wanted to believe him, to forgive him, to take him back into my life as though nothing had happened. But another part of me, the part that had been hurt so deeply, knew that I couldn't just let it go. The damage had been done, and it wasn't just Lily's manipulation that had torn me apart. It was David's silence, his unwillingness to stand up for me, his failure to see me as more than just the woman who cooked his meals and washed his clothes. That realization hurt more than anything. I had given everything to this family. I had been there for them through thick and thin, but when it came time for me to need them, they were nowhere to be found. The house, once filled with love and laughter, now felt empty, hollow. I could hear the echoes of past conversations, the laughter of family gatherings, but it all seemed so distant now. It was as if those moments had never really happened, as if I had been living in a dream and now I was waking up to the reality of my own solitude. But I refused to let that define me. I was more than the sum of my past mistakes, more than the disappointments I had endured. I was Martha, and Martha was stronger than she had ever realized. I needed a change, something to remind myself of who I was outside of my role as a mother, a wife, a grandmother. I needed to live for myself, not for the expectations of others. I went through the house, room by room, packing up things that no longer served me. The old photo albums, the trinkets that had once held so much meaning. Each one felt like a weight, a reminder of a life that no longer fit. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I felt like I was losing a part of myself, like I was abandoning memories that had defined me for so long. But then I remembered what I had been through, what I had allowed myself to become. I couldn't keep holding on to the past if it meant staying stuck in a place where I wasn't valued. I had to move forward. As I packed up my things, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. This was my time to rediscover who I was, to find my own path without the weight of family expectations bearing down on me. The journey wouldn't be easy, and I knew there would be times when I doubted myself, but I was ready. I was ready to take control of my life. I wasn't sure where I would go yet, but I knew I had to leave. I needed to be somewhere new, somewhere where I could rebuild, where I could be Martha again, not just someone's mother or wife, but a person with her own dreams, her own desires. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about getting back at anyone. It was about reclaiming my own happiness, my own sense of self-worth. I wasn't going to let anyone else determine my future. I was going to live for me, and no one could take that away from me. The world outside was waiting, and it was time for me to step into it, ready to face whatever came next. I had spent enough time in the shadows. It was time to step into the light. I woke up the next morning feeling strangely lighter, as though a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The house was still quiet, but it didn't feel oppressive anymore. It felt like freedom. I stood by the window, looking out at the neighborhood. The sun was shining, the birds were chirping, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe. I had left everything behind, my home, my family, and yet, it didn't feel like a loss. It felt like a new beginning. I spent the day settling into my new routine. I had moved into a small apartment on the other side of town, far from the memories that had haunted me for so long. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The simplicity of it all was refreshing. No more elaborate dinners to prepare, no more fake smiles and forced conversations. It was just me, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything to anyone. As I unpacked my belongings, I found a picture frame with a photo of David and me, taken years ago during a family vacation. I stared at it for a while, my fingers tracing the glass. I remembered the way he used to laugh, the way he would always reach out for my hand when we walked together. It seemed like a lifetime ago, a different version of my life. But I couldn't stay in the past. I couldn't keep holding on to something that wasn't there anymore. I put the photo in a box, away from my sight. I wasn't ready to look at it just yet. As the days passed, I began to explore the city, taking long walks in the park, visiting new places, meeting new people. I started reading again, something I hadn't done in years. I had always loved books, but I had let the demands of family life push those little joys aside. Now, I was rediscovering them. I joined a local book club, met some fascinating people, and started doing things I had always wanted to do. I was building a new life, one where I was in control, where I could be myself without the constant judgment of others. One evening, as I sat in the park, watching the sunset, I thought about the conversation with David. He had called me again, but this time, I didn't answer. Part of me wanted to talk to him, to tell him that I was doing okay, that I was starting over. But another part of me knew that I needed to do this alone. I couldn't rely on him anymore. I couldn't go back to the way things were. The past was gone, and I had to embrace the future. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. I was no longer trying to hold on to something that wasn't mine to keep. I was free to be who I wanted to be, without the weight of the past holding me back. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was ready for it. I was ready to build the life I deserved. I woke up early that morning, feeling the crisp air seep in through the open window. It was a Sunday, a day I had always dreaded when I was at home with the family. But now here I was in my new apartment, the sun casting a warm glow over the small living room, and it felt like the start of something new. I could hear the sounds of the city outside, the faint hum of traffic, the distant chatter of neighbors, but it didn't feel overwhelming. It felt like life was beginning to move at my pace. I made myself a cup of coffee, something I had never had time for before, and sat down at the small table by the window. I opened my journal, something I hadn't written in for years, and let the words flow freely. It felt cathartic, like I was finally letting go of everything I had been holding inside. I wrote about the past few months, about the decisions I had made, and the emotions that had come with them. I wrote about the pain of leaving, the anger I had felt, but also the relief. It wasn't easy, but I knew it was the right choice. I had spent so many years putting others before myself, always trying to make everyone else happy, and now it was my turn. I was reclaiming my life, my happiness. The morning passed quickly as I continued to reflect on my journey. I thought about David, about the conversation we had, and how much I had wanted to fix things between us. But I knew, deep down, that I couldn't go back to the way things were. I couldn't erase the years of silence, the way he had stood by while Lily manipulated him. I had to let go of that, as much as it hurt. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that letting go was part of the process. I couldn't change the past, but I could control my future. And my future didn't include living in the shadows of my past mistakes. I stood up from the table and walked to the window, looking out at the world beyond. The world was full of possibilities, and for the first time, I felt like I could take on whatever came next. I didn't need to be afraid of what the future held. I had survived the hardest part. I had walked away from the life I had known, and now I was free to create a new one. I didn't know exactly what that new life would look like, but I knew it was going to be mine. And that was enough for me. As the days passed, I grew more comfortable with my decision. I spent time focusing on myself, taking walks in the park, reading books I had always meant to get to. I joined a yoga class and even took up painting, something I had always wanted to try but never had the time for. I was rediscovering who I was, without the roles of mother, wife, and grandmother weighing me down. I was just Martha, and that was enough. One evening, as I was walking home from the bookstore, I received another call from David. My heart skipped a beat, but I didn't hesitate to answer. "Mom," he said, his voice softer than before. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said. I don't want to lose you." I took a deep breath, my hand resting on the railing of the steps. "David, I appreciate your words, but I need you to understand something." I replied, my voice calm but firm. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness, and I'm not expecting things to go back to the way they were. I'm moving forward, and I need you to do the same." There was a long pause, and I could hear him breathing softly on the other end of the line. "I understand," he said quietly. "I just wanted to let you know that I'm here, whenever you're ready to talk." I smiled, a small, bittersweet smile. "Thank you, David. But right now I need to focus on myself. I hope you can understand that." We said our goodbyes, and I ended the call. I wasn't sure what the future held for my relationship with David, but I knew one thing. I had taken the first step toward healing, toward living the life I had always deserved. And that was enough for me. I woke up that morning feeling the sunlight warming the corner of the room. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel rushed. I didn't have to check the time or plan out my day around everyone else's needs. It was a strange feeling, but a peaceful one. I stretched slowly and smiled to myself. The world outside was waiting for me, but today, I would take it all in at my own pace. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of change. I had taken a huge step, one that felt monumental, yet necessary. The silence from David's calls had become less painful over time. I had accepted that maybe this was the distance I needed to heal, to find my own way. I wasn't holding my breath for an apology anymore, but I had stopped feeling resentful. The anger had slowly transformed into something I hadn't expected: acceptance. I spent the day doing things I hadn't allowed myself to do in years. I visited a small coffee shop downtown, a cozy little place with wooden tables and the smell of freshly baked bread in the air. I had a latte, something I hadn't had in a while, and sat by the window, watching the people go by. The world didn't seem so overwhelming anymore. I was finding joy in the little things again. Later that evening, I took a long walk through the park. The trees were beginning to change colors, the leaves starting to turn shades of orange and gold. It was beautiful. I had never noticed how peaceful the park could be before, how quiet and still everything was. As I walked, I thought about everything that had led me to this point. The years of feeling invisible, of sacrificing myself for a family that didn't see me, and how I had finally made the decision to stand up for myself. It hadn't been easy, and it still wasn't. But I was learning to take each day as it came, without worrying about what the future held. The sound of footsteps behind me broke my thoughts. I turned to see a woman walking towards me, a friendly smile on her face. "Beautiful evening, isn't it?" she said. I smiled back, nodding. "Yes, it really is." We walked side by side for a while, the conversation light and easy. We talked about the weather, the park, and slowly, we began to share a bit more: our lives, our experiences. I told her about my move, about how I had spent so many years living for others, and now, I was learning how to live for myself. She listened, offering a kind word here and there. As we parted ways, she wished me well, and I couldn't help but feel grateful for that simple connection. It wasn't much, but it was a reminder that I wasn't alone. That even in the quiet moments, there was still kindness, still the possibility of new beginnings. I made my way home that night with a light heart. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I was okay with that. I didn't need all the answers. I didn't need anyone else to tell me what to do. I was Martha, and that was enough. In this heartfelt journey of self-discovery, one woman confronts the challenges of family life and betrayal, navigating her path towards independence. Family stories are often filled with love, but sometimes they hold painful truths that need to be faced. In this tale, a woman experiences the deep betrayal of her family, especially from a daughter-in-law and her own son. As the tension builds during a family dinner, one woman's quiet resolve grows into a powerful decision to change the course of her life. With each day, she unravels the pain of years of sacrifice, finding solace in the small joys of life and the emotional relief of reclaiming her identity. As family stories unfold, the protagonist must come to terms with her past while making bold decisions to protect her future. She learns that no matter how much she gave to others, it's time to focus on her own well-being. Acknowledging the truth and stepping away from those who manipulated her, she embarks on a new journey, one filled with self-empowerment. These family stories don't always end with reconciliations, but they provide the opportunity for growth and new beginnings. In the end, this story is not just about betrayal and loss, but also about the strength to embrace a new chapter of life. Family stories can be painful, but they often lead to moments of clarity, where one can reclaim their life and future. Discover how this woman's journey unfolds as she steps away from her past, creating her own future in the process of healing and growth. Character 1 is a white woman in her late 60s. She wears a simple but elegant navy blue dress with pearl buttons. She has soft silver hair styled neatly. The scene is a frontal view of her. No cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Character 2 is a white man in his early 40s. He has short dark hair and a clean-shaven face. He wears a casual button-up shirt in light blue. The scene is a frontal view of him. No cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Prompt 1. The camera zooms in on a tense confrontation between Martha and David in a cold, dimly lit living room. Martha stands tall, her posture strong and defiant, her eyes filled with emotion. David stands across from her, looking conflicted, his hands clenched at his sides. Lily is in the background, her arms crossed, watching the exchange with a smug expression. The tension between Martha and David is palpable, as Martha speaks calmly but firmly, confronting David about his failure to support her. The atmosphere is charged with emotion, the space heavy with the years of unresolved pain. This is the pivotal moment where Martha decides to take control of her life. The camera captures the intensity of their faces, focusing on Martha's unwavering resolve and David's internal struggle. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. 1, 2. Prompt 2. Martha is sitting alone at a small kitchen table in her new apartment. The morning light filters softly through the window, casting a warm glow on the minimalist surroundings. She sips her coffee slowly, savoring the quiet, peaceful moment. Her face is calm and content, with a slight smile on her lips as she watches the world outside. There is a sense of relief and freedom in her expression, as she is finally living life on her own terms. The camera focuses on Martha's relaxed posture and peaceful demeanor, capturing the subtle joy of being alone and in control. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. 1. Prompt 3. David is at his office, sitting at a desk in a modern, sleek workspace. He is wearing a light blue shirt and looking at his computer screen with a distracted, tired expression. His desk is neat, but there is an obvious tension in the way he holds himself. The camera pans to a photo on his desk of Martha and him, smiling at a family event, a reminder of the strained relationship between them. His face reflects the guilt and inner conflict he feels. David picks up his phone and glances at it, unsure whether to call Martha. The sense of frustration and guilt is evident as he looks at the family photo once more. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. 2. Prompt 4. Martha, David, and Lily are standing together in Martha's new apartment. Martha faces Lily, her expression calm but firm, as she confronts Lily about her manipulation of David and the way she has treated Martha. Lily stands with her arms crossed, looking smug and defensive, while David stands behind her, looking torn and uncomfortable. The camera focuses on Martha's determined face as she speaks, contrasting with David's conflicted expression. The atmosphere is charged with tension as the family's unresolved issues are finally brought to light. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. 1, 2. Prompt 5. Martha is sitting alone in a cozy coffee shop, a peaceful expression on her face as she sips her coffee. The soft lighting and warm colors of the cafe create a serene atmosphere. She watches the people outside through the window, content and at peace. The camera focuses on Martha's face, capturing the joy and fulfillment she finds in this simple moment. She smiles slightly, savoring the quiet comfort of the moment. There is a sense of freedom and self-assurance in her demeanor as she embraces her newfound independence. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. 1. Prompt 6. Martha stands on her apartment balcony, looking out at the city skyline as the sun sets. She takes a deep breath, her face peaceful and confident. The camera zooms out to show her, standing tall, with the city stretching out before her, symbolizing the endless possibilities ahead. The wind gently blows through her hair, adding a sense of calm and freedom to the scene. The camera focuses on Martha's face, capturing the contentment and strength she feels as she embraces her new life. This is her moment of peace and self-realization. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. 1.